The blood-soaked telegram crumpled in Vivian Fisher's trembling hand as she stood on the dusty main street of Wood River, Nebraska, in the summer of 1878, her entire life shattered by 12 callous words. Your husband died. Stop. Ranch worthless. Stop. Return east. Stop. Nothing here. Men stopped to stare at the young widow of 22, with her fine Boston clothes now coated in prairie dust, and her auburn hair escaping its pins after the grueling stagecoach journey. Vivian had left everything behind 3 months earlier to join Samuel, her husband of barely a year, at the ranch he'd written about with such enthusiasm. Now she learned he'd died in a riding accident just days before her arrival. "Madam," the station master cleared his throat awkwardly. "If you need arrangements to head back east, I can. I'm staying," Vivian said, surprising even herself with the firmness in her voice. "I've come to claim my husband's property." The station master exchanged glances with the portly man beside him. "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Fisher, but there's not much to claim. Your husband's land is worthless barren soil, limited water access. That's why nobody wanted it before him." "Then they don't know what worth means," came a deep voice from behind her. Vivian turned to see a tall man dismounting from a chestnut stallion. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his eyes clear blue beneath the brim of his worn Stetson. Unlike the other men gathered, he didn't look at her with pity, but with something resembling respect. "Nathan Young," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "I own the neighboring ranch to what was your husband's property." "Vivian Fisher," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. "Don't listen to Nathan," the portly man interjected. "He's been trying to buy that land cheap for years, claims he sees potential where nobody else does." Nathan's expression remained unchanged. "Mrs. Fisher, your husband and I had begun discussions about water rights before his accident. I'd be happy to continue that conversation with you once you've had time to settle." Before Vivian could respond, the stagecoach driver tossed her small trunk down from the roof. "That's the last of it, madam." Vivian looked around the dusty street, suddenly aware she had nowhere to go. The ranch was reportedly miles outside of town, and she had no transportation. "I can take you to your property," Nathan offered, as if reading her thoughts. "Unless you'd prefer to stay in town tonight." Town meant the curious stares of strangers and the whispers about the eastern widow with the worthless land. Vivian straightened her spine and made her decision. "I'd appreciate the ride, Mr. Young. I'd like to see my ranch immediately." "It's a rough journey," he warned, taking her trunk and securing it to his horse. "I'm stronger than I look," she replied. As Nathan helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her, Vivian felt the eyes of the townspeople on her back. Their judgment was palpable. They had already decided her fate, a quick retreat back east, tail between her legs. But something inside her had hardened during the long journey west, something that refused to break. The weight of Nathan's arm around her waist as he guided the horse out of town was strangely steadying. She had come west for a new life with Samuel. That dream had died with him, but perhaps another could take its place. "They said your land was worthless," Nathan said quietly as the town disappeared behind them. "Then they don't know what worth means." The journey to the ranch took over 2 hours, across rolling prairie that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. Vivian had never seen such open space in her life. Boston, with its crowded streets and tall buildings, felt like another world entirely. "There," Nathan finally said, pointing to a structure in the distance. "That's your place." Vivian's heart sank as they approached. The ranch was little more than a small cabin with a lean-to stable beside it. A broken fence enclosed what might have been intended as a garden, though nothing grew there now. A solitary oak tree provided the only shade. "It's not much," Nathan admitted as he helped her down from the horse. "But it's solid. Your husband built it himself." Vivian approached the cabin slowly. This was where Samuel had spent his final days, dreaming of the life they would build together. Her hand trembled as she pushed open the door. The interior was simple but neat: a small iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed against the wall. Samuel's few possessions were arranged with care. On the table lay his journal, open to his last entry. "I'll give you some privacy," Nathan said from the doorway. "I'll just tend to my horse." Alone in the cabin, Vivian ran her fingers over Samuel's handwriting. His final words spoke of his excitement for her arrival, his plans for their future. Tears blurred her vision as she realized he had died believing in something no one else could see: the potential of this seemingly worthless land. When Nathan returned, she had composed herself. "Thank you for bringing me here, Mr. Young." "Nathan, please." He hesitated. "Mrs. Fisher, I don't want to overstep, but you can't stay out here alone tonight." "There's no food and I have nowhere else to go," she replied simply. Nathan's expression softened. "My ranch is about 4 miles east of here. I have a spare room where you could stay until you decide what you want to do. My housekeeper, Mrs. Perez, is there too." Vivian wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage on her own, but practicality won out. "That's very kind. Just until I get my bearings." As they prepared to leave, Nathan paused at the doorway. "One more thing. Your husband was working on something before he died. I think you should see it." He led her to the back of the property where a small stream trickled through a rocky outcropping. Samuel had constructed an elaborate system of wooden troughs and channels. "He was diverting water from my property to irrigate this land," Nathan explained. "We had an agreement in the works. The soil here is actually quite good, it just needs consistent water." Vivian stared at the unfinished project, understanding blooming in her heart. "This is why he thought the ranch would succeed." Nathan nodded. "Samuel had vision. It's why I disagreed with everyone who called this land worthless." He looked directly at her. "The question is, Mrs. Fisher, do you share that vision?" Vivian gazed across the seemingly barren land, seeing it through new eyes through Samuel's eyes. And suddenly, she knew she couldn't leave. "Not yet." "I do," she said firmly. "And please call me Vivian." The young ranch was everything Samuel's was not: established, thriving, practical. As they rode into the yard, Vivian took in the sturdy main house, the large barn, the corrals filled with cattle and horses. 3 cowboys paused in their work to stare curiously at her. "Boss brought company," one remarked as Nathan helped Vivian down from the horse. "Mrs. Fisher will be staying with us for a while," Nathan announced, his tone making it clear no further commentary was welcome. Her husband was Samuel Fisher. Recognition and something like respect flickered across the men's faces. Apparently, Samuel had made an impression here. A stout Mexican woman appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're just in time for supper, Nathan. I see you've brought a guest. Mrs. Perez, this is Mrs. Fisher. She'll be staying in the spare room for a few days." The housekeeper's warm brown eyes assessed Vivian quickly. "You look dead on your feet, child. Come inside and wash up. Food's almost ready." That night, after the most satisfying meal she'd had since leaving Boston, Vivian sat on the porch with Nathan. The vast Nebraska sky was ablaze with more stars than she'd ever seen. "Tomorrow, I'll take you into town to settle your husband's affairs," Nathan offered. "There will be paperwork at the bank, and you should meet with Sheriff Miller about the circumstances of the accident." Vivian nodded gratefully. "And I'll need supplies if I'm to stay at the ranch." Nathan's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're certain about staying?" "I need to try," she said simply. "I owe Samuel that much. Ranching isn't easy, especially for a woman alone," Nathan cautioned. "Most of the men in these parts won't take you seriously." "Then they'll have to learn," Vivian replied with more confidence than she felt. "I'm a quick study, Mr. Young." "Nathan," he reminded her with the barest hint of a smile. "Nathan," she echoed softly. The next morning they rode into Wood River together. Vivian had borrowed a plain dress from Mrs. Perez, who had clucked disapprovingly at her impractical Eastern clothes. She had also pinned her hair more severely, determined to present a serious image to the town. Their first stop was the bank, where the manager, Mr. Phillips, seemed dismayed to find Vivian claiming ownership of Samuel's property. "Mrs. Fisher, I must be frank," he said, shuffling papers nervously. "Your husband's loan for that land is in arrears. He hadn't made a payment in 3 months." "How much does he owe?" Vivian asked calmly. The sum Phillips named made her throat tighten, but she maintained her composure. "I understand." "And how much time do I have to make good on these payments?" Phillips exchanged glances with Nathan. "Well, given the circumstances, we would typically foreclose immediately, but—" "I'll cover the arrears," Nathan interrupted. "Consider it an investment in our water rights agreement." Phillips seemed relieved. "Very well. That gives Mrs. Fisher 30 days until the next payment is due." Outside the bank, Vivian turned to Nathan. "Why did you do that? You don't even know if I'll honor Samuel's agreement." "Call it a calculated risk," he replied. "Besides, good neighbors are hard to come by out here." Their next stop was the sheriff's office, where Vivian received the painful details of Samuel's accident. He had been thrown from his horse while inspecting the water diversion project, breaking his neck in the fall. No one had found him until the following day. "He didn't suffer," Sheriff Miller assured her awkwardly. "It was quick." Small comfort, but Vivian thanked him nonetheless. The general store was their final destination. As Vivian selected basic supplies, flour, coffee, beans, salt, she became aware of the stares and whispers following her. "That's the Fisher widow. Heard she's staying at Young's place. Won't last a week on that worthless plot." Nathan stepped closer to her, his presence silencing the gossip. "Don't give them the satisfaction," he murmured. "Half this town is built on spite and the other half on jealousy." Vivian smiled despite herself. "And which half do you belong to, Mr. Young?" "Neither. I mind my own business and expect others to do the same." His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "But I do enjoy proving people wrong now and then." By the time they returned to the Fisher ranch that afternoon, loaded with supplies, Vivian was exhausted but determined. Nathan helped her unpack and ensured the stove was working properly. "I've asked one of my hands to bring over a milk cow tomorrow," he said, "and some chickens if you'd like." "That's very generous, but I can't accept charity," Vivian protested. "Not charity, part of our water agreement." Nathan leaned against the doorframe. "Speaking of which, we should discuss terms." Over the next hour, Nathan explained Samuel's plan in detail. The stream that ran through Nathan's property could be partially diverted to irrigate Vivian's land, making it suitable for crops. In exchange, Nathan would have grazing rights on a portion of Vivian's land and a small percentage of any harvest. "It's a fair arrangement," Vivian concluded. Samuel was clever to propose it. "He was," Nathan agreed. "The question is whether you can implement it alone." Vivian gazed out the small window at the unfinished water channels. "I'll need help," she admitted. "I don't know the first thing about irrigation." "I'll send over Miguel tomorrow. He helped Samuel design the system." Nathan hesitated. "Are you sure you want to stay here alone tonight?" "I'll be fine," Vivian assured him, though the thought of the empty, isolated cabin made her uneasy. "I have Samuel's rifle, and you showed me how to use it." Nathan nodded reluctantly. "If you hear anything unusual, fire a shot. I'll come running." After he left, the silence of the cabin pressed in on Vivian. For the first time since receiving the telegram, she allowed herself to truly grieve. She cried for Samuel, for the future they'd never have, for her own fear and uncertainty. Then she dried her eyes and began to plan. By dawn, Vivian had made a list of everything needed to make the ranch viable. Water was the priority, then shelter improvements, then livestock. She had a small inheritance from her parents that would help, but she would need to be frugal and creative. As promised, Miguel arrived mid-morning with a docile Jersey cow and 6 clucking hens. The middle-aged Mexican was respectful but frank as he assessed the irrigation work. "It is good design," he told Vivian in accented English, "but much work still. Many days." "Then we'd better get started," she replied, rolling up her sleeves. For the next week, Vivian worked alongside Miguel from sunrise to sunset. She learned to dig channels, to calculate gradients, to seal joints with pitch. Her soft hands blistered, then calloused. Her fair skin burned, then bronzed. Her muscles ached, then strengthened. Nathan visited daily, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just checking on their progress. Vivian found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. "You're making good progress," he observed one evening as they sat on her porch drinking coffee. "Miguel is a good teacher," Vivian replied, "and a patient one." "You're a good student," Nathan countered. "Most Eastern ladies would have given up by now." Vivian smiled wryly. "I was never a very good Eastern lady. My father always said I asked too many questions and had too many opinions." Sounds like qualities that serve a rancher well. Nathan's gaze lingered on her face in a way that made her cheeks warm. "I'm still not sure I'll succeed," she admitted. "The irrigation system is just the beginning. One challenge at a time," Nathan advised. "That's how the West was built." By the end of the second week, the water channels were complete. When they opened the main sluice gate and water flowed onto Vivian's land for the first time, she couldn't help the tears of triumph that sprang to her eyes. "Now we prepare the soil," Miguel explained, showing her how to turn the newly moistened earth. Word of Vivian's efforts had spread through Wood River. Some townsfolk drove by out of curiosity, others stopped to offer advice, some genuine, some deliberately misleading. A few brought small gift seeds, a coffee cake, a hand-sewn cushion. Slowly, Vivian began to distinguish friend from foe. One afternoon, as Vivian was planting her first experimental row of corn, she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw 3 men she recognized from town, led by Howard Tate, the wealthy owner of the largest ranch in the county. "Mrs. Fisher," Tate called, dismounting with a flourish. "I've come to make you an offer for this property." Vivian straightened, wiping soil from her hands. "It's not for sale, Mr. Tate." Tate laughed as if she'd made a clever joke. "Come now, we all know this experiment of yours can't last." "I'm prepared to be generous, $300 for the whole parcel." "The land is worth at least 5 times that," Vivian replied evenly. "Worth?" Tate's amusement vanished. "This land is worthless, Mrs. Fisher, always has been. I'm offering you a kindness. Then I must decline your kindness." Vivian turned back to her planting. Tate's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. A woman alone can't survive out here." "She's not alone," came Nathan's voice as he rode up, Miguel beside him. "And I believe the lady gave you her answer." Tate's gaze shifted between Nathan and Vivian, his expression calculating. "I see. So that's how it is. Well, young, I hope she's worth defending because you've just made an enemy." "Wouldn't be the first time," Nathan replied calmly. After Tate and his men departed, Vivian turned to Nathan. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Nathan said simply. "Tate's been trying to control the water rights in this county for years. If he had your land, he could block my access to the stream." So it was about the water, Vivian said, feeling oddly disappointed. Nathan's gaze held hers. Not entirely. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities until Miguel cleared his throat. "The seedlings from town, they have arrived," he announced. The next day, Nathan brought troubling news. "Tate's filed a complaint with the water commissioner, claiming our diversion violates his downstream rights." "But the stream doesn't even reach his property," Vivian protested. "He's claiming it could in future dry seasons. It's nonsense, but he has influence with the commissioner." Nathan's expression was grim. "There's a hearing next week in Lincoln. What happens if we lose? We'd have to remove the diversion." Nathan hesitated. "Without water, the land becomes worthless again," Vivian finished, feeling sick. "All their work for nothing." "We'll fight it," Nathan assured her. "I've sent for a lawyer from Omaha who specializes in water rights." The hearing was held in the county courthouse in Lincoln, a full day's journey from Wood River. Nathan insisted on accompanying Vivian, despite her protests that she could manage alone. "Tate will bring half a dozen men to intimidate the commissioner," he explained. "Numbers matter." The courthouse was crowded with ranchers and farmers, all with stakes in water rights decisions. The water commissioner, a thin man named Jeffries with spectacles and a nervous manner, called their case first. Tate's lawyer presented a convincing argument about the theoretical impact of water diversion on future downstream users, complete with maps and calculations. Vivian's heart sank as the commissioner nodded along, clearly impressed. When their turn came, Nathan's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Marks, approached the bench. "Miss Marks." The commissioner seemed surprised. "I wasn't aware women practiced law in Nebraska territory." "They don't generally, sir," she replied crisply. "I practice in Omaha, where the judges are more concerned with legal arguments than the gender of those presenting them." A ripple of amusement ran through the courtroom, quickly silenced by Jeffrey's glare. "Miss." Marks proceeded to dismantle Tate's argument with precision, producing water survey records showing the stream had never reached Tate's property in the last 20 years of measurements. "Furthermore," she concluded, "Mrs. Fisher's late husband filed the appropriate water rights claim with this very office last spring. I have the receipt of filing here, signed by yourself, Commissioner." Jeffries examined the document, his expression sour. "It appears to be in order," he admitted reluctantly. "However, Mr. Tate's concerns about future impact are speculative at best," Miss Marks interrupted. "Water law in this territory is clear. First in time, first in right. The Fishers established their claim legally and first." After a tense deliberation, Jeffries ruled in Vivian's favor, though his reluctance was obvious. Tate stormed from the courtroom, pausing only to hiss at Vivian, "This isn't over, woman." Nathan squeezed her hand. "Don't let him frighten you, he's all bluster. Thank you for finding Miss Marks," Vivian said as they prepared for the journey home. "She was remarkable." Nathan smiled. "Ellie and I grew up together in Missouri. She's always been remarkable and always enjoyed proving men wrong." On the stage coach back to Wood River, the swaying motion lulled Vivian into drowsiness. Half asleep, she found her head resting on Nathan's shoulder. When she started to pull away, embarrassed, his hand covered hers. "Rest," he said softly. "You've earned it." By midsummer, Vivian's efforts were beginning to show results. The garden behind the cabin flourished with vegetables. The small cornfield was knee-high, and she had added 3 goats and a few pigs to her growing livestock collection. The irrigation system worked beautifully, turning the once dry land into a productive oasis. Nathan continued to visit regularly, sometimes helping with heavier work, sometimes just bringing news from town. Vivian found herself watching for his arrival, her heart quickening at the sight of his tall figure on horseback. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in golds and crimsons, Nathan turned to her with unusual seriousness. "I've been offered a contract to supply beef to the army post at Fort Kearney," he said. "It would mean driving most of my herd there next month." "That's wonderful," Vivian said, ignoring the pang of disappointment at the thought of his absence. "It's a good opportunity." "It is," Nathan agreed, "but I'd be gone at least 3 weeks, maybe a month." "I'll be fine," Vivian assured him, though the prospect of not seeing him for so long disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. Nathan studied her face in the fading light. "I've grown accustomed to seeing you every day, Vivian. I'll miss that." The simple admission made her breath catch. "I'll miss you too," she confessed. Their gazes held, and Vivian thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stood and cleared his throat. "I should go. Early start tomorrow." As she watched him ride away, Vivian acknowledged what she'd been trying to deny for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathan Young. The realization brought both joy and guilt. Samuel had been dead only a few months. Was it disloyal to feel this way so soon? And yet, she couldn't help thinking that Samuel would approve. He had admired Nathan, had sought him out as a business partner and neighbor. The next day brought an unexpected visitor, Eliza Miller, the sheriff's wife, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for plain speaking. "Thought it was time I paid a proper call," she announced, presenting Vivian with a jar of preserved peaches. "Been meaning to for weeks." Over tea, Eliza revealed the real purpose of her visit. "Town's talking about you and Nathan Young," she said bluntly. "Thought you should know." Vivian felt her cheeks flush. "There's nothing improper between us." "Didn't say there was," Eliza replied. "But folks will talk regardless. Nathan's the most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, and you're different from the women around here. Educated. Independent." "I'm also a recent widow," Vivian pointed out. Eliza's expression softened. "Grief has no timetable, my dear. And life out here is too short and hard to deny happiness when it finds you." After Eliza left, Vivian reflected on her words. Was happiness finding her? Despite the daily challenges and uncertainties, she realized she hadn't felt so alive in years. The land that everyone had called worthless was becoming something valuable under her care. And Nathan saw her worth when others didn't. The weeks of Nathan's absence dragged by. Vivian threw herself into ranch work, harvesting her first vegetables, preserving food for winter, and planning fall plantings. Miguel continued to help a few days each week, and Mrs. Perez visited occasionally, teaching Vivian to make tortillas and sharing gossip from the Young ranch. "Nathan sent another letter yesterday," Mrs. Perez mentioned during one visit. "He asks about you every time." Vivian tried to hide her pleasure at this news. "The cattle drive is going well then, but he is eager to return." The housekeeper gave Vivian a knowing look. "He has never been so eager before." 3 weeks after Nathan's departure, disaster struck. A sudden summer storm brought lightning that ignited the dry grass at the edge of Vivian's property. The fire spread quickly, threatening the cabin and barn. Vivian worked desperately to create a fire break, using the irrigation channels to soak the ground around the structures. Miguel arrived as the flames approached, bringing 2 other ranch hands. Together, they managed to save the cabin and most of the barn, though one wall was charred. By morning, the fire had burned itself out, leaving a swath of blackened earth across the southern portion of Vivian's land. Exhausted and soot-covered, she surveyed the damage with Miguel. "Could have been much worse," he assured her. "The buildings stand, the animals live, the crops mostly survive." "Yes," Vivian agreed, trying to focus on these blessings. But in truth, the fire had terrified her, reminding her of her vulnerability alone on the prairie. That afternoon, Howard Tate rode up with two of his men. He surveyed the fire damage with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Terrible shame," he said insincerely. "Perhaps now you'll reconsider my offer, Mrs. Fisher," Vivian's patience snapped. "Mr. Tate, if you came here hoping disaster would drive me away, you've wasted your time. This land is not for sale, not to you, not to anyone." Tate's expression hardened. "You'll change your mind eventually. Women always do." "This woman won't," came a familiar voice. Nathan dismounted from his horse, his expression thunderous as he approached. "You're trespassing, Tate." Tate sneered. "Back early from your cattle drive, young, rushing home to your woman." Nathan's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained controlled. "Get off this property. Now." Something in his tone must have convinced Tate, who backed down with poor grace. "We'll discuss this another time, Mrs. Fisher, when your watchdog isn't around." After Tate departed, Nathan turned to Vivian, his eyes taking in her exhausted state, the singed hem of her dress, the soot on her face. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms. "I heard about the fire in town," he murmured into her hair. "I rode straight here." Vivian allowed herself to lean into his strength for a moment. "I was so afraid," she admitted, "not just of the fire, of failing, of losing everything." Nathan drew back to look at her. "You didn't fail. You fought, and you saved what matters." His hand gently wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. "You're the bravest person I know, Vivian Fisher." The admiration in his eyes made her heart swell. "I'm glad you're home," she whispered. His gaze dropped to her lips, and this time he didn't hesitate. His kiss was gentle at first, a question she answered by wrapping her arms around his neck. When they finally parted, his smile was radiant. "I've been wanting to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. "What took you so long?" Vivian teased, feeling lighthearted despite her exhaustion. "Respect, patience." His expression grew serious. "I know it's soon after Samuel, and I don't want to rush you, but Vivian," she placed her fingers against his lips. "Life is short out here, Nathan, too short to deny happiness when it finds us." His smile returned as he recognized Eliza's words. Wise woman, the sheriff's wife. In the weeks that followed, Vivian and Nathan's relationship deepened. They worked side by side repairing the fire damage, planning fall plantings, and expanding the irrigation system. In the evenings, they shared simple meals and conversations that ranged from books they'd read to dreams they harbored. Vivian learned that Nathan had come west after the Civil War, seeking a fresh start after losing his family farm in Missouri. He had worked as a cowhand, a hunter, even a scout, before saving enough to buy his ranch 10 years ago. He spoke of his parents with affection, of his 3 sisters with exasperated fondness. In turn, Vivian told him of her childhood in Boston, her father's shipping business, her mother's social ambitions. She confessed her relief at escaping the suffocating expectations of Boston society when she married Samuel, who had shared her dream of a different kind of life. "Samuel would be proud of what you've accomplished here," Nathan told her one evening as they walked the perimeter of her flourishing cornfield. "I think he would," Vivian agreed, "though sometimes I feel guilty for being happy so soon after losing him." Nathan took her hand. "Grief and joy can coexist, Vivian. One doesn't dishonor the other." The harvest season brought new challenges and triumphs. Vivian's corn crop yielded better than expected, and her vegetable garden produced enough to sell the surplus in town. With Nathan's help, she preserved food for the winter and prepared the animals and buildings for the coming cold. News of her success spread through Wood River. Some locals who had dismissed her now showed grudging respect. Others, including Howard Tate, remained openly skeptical. "It's one successful season," Tate commented loudly in the general store when Vivian was present. Let's see if she survives the winter before calling it a triumph. I don't recall anyone asking for your assessment, Howard, Sheriff Miller replied mildly, winking at Vivian. As autumn deepened, Vivian began to feel truly at home on her land. The cabin, once stark and unwelcoming, now reflected her personality: curtains at the windows, a colorful quilt on the bed, dried flowers hanging from the ceiling beams. She had added a small porch where she could sit and watch the sunset, and planted saplings that would someday provide shade and windbreak. One crisp October evening, Nathan arrived with a small wooden box tucked under his arm. They sat on her porch, wrapped in blankets against the cooling air. "I have something to ask you," he began, uncharacteristically nervous. "Actually, two things." Vivian's heart quickened. "I'm listening." "First," he said, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl, "I want to ask if you'll marry me, Vivian Fisher." Joy bubbled up inside her. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes, I will." Nathan's smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "It was my mother's," he explained. "My father saved for 3 years to buy it for her." "It's perfect," Vivian whispered, touching the pearl reverently. "Now for the second question," Nathan continued. "Would you consider combining our lands, not just through marriage but legally? One ranch twice the size with your crops and my cattle working together." Vivian considered the proposal. "Would we live here or at your place?" "Both, maybe. My house is larger, better for a family, but I've grown fond of your cabin." His eyes held hers. "We could make it a matter of choosing each day where we want to be." "A family," Vivian repeated softly. Nathan's expression grew tender. "I'd like that someday, when you're ready." Vivian leaned forward to kiss him. "I think I'm ready for all of it, Nathan. The marriage, the combined ranch, the family. I want a life with you." Their wedding took place in November. A simple ceremony in the Wood River Church with Mrs. Perez, Miguel, Sheriff and Mrs. Miller, and a few other friends in attendance. Nathan's ranch hands decorated the church with autumn leaves and late-blooming wildflowers, and Mrs. Perez prepared a feast that combined Mexican specialties with traditional American dishes. Vivian wore a dress of deep blue silk that Nathan had ordered from Omaha, with her mother's lace shawl and flowers in her hair. Nathan, clean-shaven and uncomfortable in his best suit, couldn't take his eyes off her. "Never seen the boss so happy," one of the ranch hands commented during the celebration. "Or so nervous," he added with a grin. Howard Tate and his allies were conspicuously absent, but Vivian didn't care. The people who mattered were there, celebrating not just their marriage but the joining of two dreams, two visions of what the land could be. That winter was harsh, with blizzards that isolated the ranch for days at a time. But inside Nathan's sturdy house, now their home, Vivian discovered a different kind of contentment. They spent evenings planning the spring planting, designing an expanded irrigation system, dreaming of improvements to both properties. In January, Vivian received news that thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. She was expecting a child. "Are you happy?" she asked Nathan after telling him. His response was to lift her off her feet and spin her around, his laughter echoing through the house. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he declared. As spring approached, they began implementing their plans for the combined ranch. Nathan's cattle would graze on the restored grassland where the fire had burned, enriching the soil with their manure. Vivian's crops would expand to include wheat and barley as well as corn and vegetables. They would build a new barn between the two properties, large enough to store harvest and house additional livestock. Word of their successful partnership spread beyond Wood River. A reporter from the Omaha Herald visited to write about their innovative approach to mixed farming and ranching. The article, titled "Vision in the Valley," How one couple turned worthless land into gold, brought letters from other farmers and ranchers seeking advice. Even Howard Tate eventually had to acknowledge their success, though he did so with poor grace. "Got lucky with the weather," he muttered when Nathan won a blue ribbon for his cattle at the county fair. "Won't last," but it did last. Through drought and flood, through grasshopper plagues and cattle fever, through the birth of their son, William, and later their daughter, Emma, Nathan and Vivian's ranch prospered. They added orchards and beehives, expanded their irrigation system to neighboring farms, and eventually built a larger house halfway between their original properties, with wide porches and rooms filled with light. The worthless land that Vivian had inherited became the heart of their operation. Its soil, properly irrigated and cared for, produced the county's best corn and wheat for decades. 10 years after their marriage, as they sat on the porch of their new home watching their children play under the now mature trees Vivian had planted, Nathan reminded her of their first meeting. "Remember what I said when those men called your land worthless?" he asked. Vivian smiled, taking his hand. "You said they didn't know what worth means, and I was right." Nathan's eyes held a lifetime of love as he gazed at her, but I wasn't just talking about the land. On Vivian and Nathan's 30th wedding anniversary, Wood River held a celebration in their honor. The young Fisher Ranch had become the largest and most successful in the county, known for its innovative farming methods and generous community support. Their children William, Emma, and the twins James and Sarah, born 5 years after Emma had grown into capable adults who shared their parents' vision and work ethic. During the celebration, Sheriff Miller, now retired and white-haired, raised a toast. "To Vivian and Nathan, who saw worth where others saw worthless, who built value where others saw nothing but dust. You've shown us all what vision, hard work, and love can accomplish." As applause filled the town hall, Nathan leaned close to whisper in Vivian's ear, "Not bad for a worthless piece of land and a stubborn widow, wouldn't you say?" Vivian squeezed his hand, her heart full. "The best kind of worthless," she agreed, "is the kind that only the right eyes can see the true value in." That night, as they drove home beneath a canopy of stars much like the ones that had witnessed their first evening together, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From grief and uncertainty to love and abundance, from a small cabin and a dream to a thriving enterprise that would outlast them both. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, noticing her contemplative silence. "I'm thinking about worth," Vivian replied. "How it's not something others can define for you, how you have to see it for yourself and fight for it." Nathan smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with the expression that still made her heart skip after all these years. "Worthless land, worthless widow, that's what they said." Then they didn't know what worth means. Vivian completed their private joke, the words that had become a family motto, inscribed above the door of their home and in the hearts of their children. And as the wagon crested the hill, revealing their land spread out before them, golden fields, green pastures, the lights of their home glowing in welcome, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true worth in this place, with this man, in the life they had built together from nothing but vision, determination, and love.